All right, welcome in. It's just Dubs. We don't need no fancy open. We don't we
Nuh-uh.
don't need we don't need some song and dance. It's just JD in Phoenix and it's Kyle in the Bay home studio for Kyle Haar. Warrior season is over, but we're here as we said we would be if the Warrior season ends. And so, Kyle, good to be with you, my man. As the Warriors lose last night in Phoenix, I know we did a lengthy Dubs OT last night, over 2 hours, and got it all the way up until midnight. So, quick night of sleep, up and back at it again. I've got to figure out how I'm getting home and when. The return flights for today went pretty fast, shall I say. I may actually end up hanging out in the Valley for another day and coming back on Sunday. But as we sort through that, we're also attempting to sort through here the end of the Warrior season and a bunch of the big questions in what I think is going to be the most pivotal offseason that the Warriors have had in I can't even remember when, maybe going back to 2019 when they lost KD and they knew Klay Thompson was going to be injured, and we're trying to figure out at that point if the dynasty was truly over. It wound up not being for a number of different reasons, but I think this is truly setting up to be, in the best case scenario for the Warriors, a last dance for next year, but we don't know. Good to be with you, though, man. Let's get that out of the way. Appreciate everything from you all season long. And, yeah, it has been a grind this year for the Warriors, and no shortness of storylines to get into. But my goodness, how many truly meaningful games did it feel like the Warriors played over the course of the entire 84 in the regular season, plus the 2 play-in games that they wound up in?
Well, not a lot. And when Steph Curry returned against Houston, that felt like, oh, hey, we're all back in song and dance again. But then the 3 games after that kind of felt more or less, and I know two of them were against the Kings, but felt more or less of kind of what we saw when Steph Curry was out, and they didn't just feel like there was any consequence there. But I think this was in some ways the best case scenario, because you got to see what this lineup could do. You got to see who outside of Steph and Draymond could step up in a playoff environment, right? But at the same time, you get to stay in the lottery.
It felt like the first 5 games were meaningful, and then it felt like nothing was meaningful until the Warriors decided that the season was starting to slip away there in the middle of December, and they went from the 4-1 start to a team that wound up being 2 games under 500, ironically enough, in Phoenix after they got beat there the week before Christmas, and they had 2 games actually back-to-back against Phoenix, a home and home against Phoenix. And the second Phoenix game, remember after they got beat, there was the GP2 foul call in Phoenix late that put the Suns on the free throw line, and the Suns ended up hitting a free throw to win the game by a point. And then the Warriors played Phoenix the next game while everybody was really in the midst of, peak NFL and college football playoff and all of those things. That's when the Warriors actually got it going there, beginning that week before Christmas. And so it was those first 5 games, and then there was basically the 16-game stretch that started toward the end of December that led up until the night that Jimmy Butler tore his ACL. So they were 12-4 in that stretch. And then it felt like nothing once Steph Curry went out, but really even the week and a half before when Jimmy went out truly mattered. The championship aspirations at that point were done. It was a matter of where was this team going to finish, because at that point they had already won enough really to where they weren't going to lose enough to miss out on the play-in. So that's about 16 games. And then it did feel like, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel like it truly, the 2 Sacramento games felt like they mattered all that much of the last week of the season. But the Houston game did, and the game on Wednesday in the play-in tournament did. So I don't know, do the math on that. That's about maybe 22 games that felt truly meaningful in what is not a completely lost season because you can always learn things about players that maybe you weren't anticipating to learn. But the goal, I think, first and foremost, is to play a hell of a lot more than 20, let's call it, meaningful games. And for the Warriors to have that be the case, yes, they're going to have to be healthier, but yes, they also have a ton of work to do to add to this roster to put themselves in a position where they can actually play. To me, you want to be playing about 50 meaningful games and not in the 20s.
No, I mean it did give us, good moments like Guy Santos and our guy or my guy Charles Bassey, and some Pods moments mixed in and some Pat Spencer moments mixed in. But when the season is kind of defined by injuries and guys leveling up who are 11 to 15 or two-way players, right? To start the season, it's not a successful season, but I say that, but I think Guy Santos has played his way into being a big part of what the Warriors roster is going to look like next season. I think Pods has kind of played his way up, but we'll see how the roster shakes out this offseason. I mean, I know we'll get through it throughout the show on all the question marks between Melton and Porzingis and Horford and who could they add, right? But the season was the good moments of the season were seeing guys who may not have gotten a lot of playing time get more playing time and kind of seize that opportunity.
It really is, I think, Guy for sure, because he went from somebody that you didn't even know if he was a bona fide rotation player in the NBA to I think proving that he is, number one, and that he's even maybe more than that. Like he's one of those guys I would put almost in the category of, could be a starter, could continue to get better, could be a starter. Definitely, I think, can be a part-time starter, right? The one thing I will still say, and I mentioned it last night, and this is no slight to any of these three players, but I do think, in a perfect world, Podziemski and Moody and Guy Santos would be, 6, 7, 8 on your roster. Like those would be your number, your first bench guys, right? All young, all do different things, all contribute to winning for the most part in a really positive way. Podziemski still, I think, has some frustrating moments. Although there are nights where Moody goes quiet with his shot, and there are nights where even Guy Santos, the more they've put the ball in his hands, will have some turnover problems himself, in addition to Podziemski, who had some turnover problems last night. Now, look, this isn't a perfect world, and you can't, but all three of those players, I will say, they have shown that they can be, I think, at a minimum, part-time starters on a pretty good team. Can they be full-time starters? I think we know the answer, that all three of them can't be, but they are three players that can contribute in their own way. Obviously, the Warriors are going to have to get Moody back and healthy, and how long is that going to take? Do we even see him next season? That there is a question to that, and if they do, it's obviously going to be, I think, closer to the second half or even the final third after the All-Star break in terms of his return. So in a weird way, as much as the Warriors don't have a young star among their group, and you look at the Kuminga saga and the way that played out, and it was just never going to work in terms of him playing his best basketball with the Warriors. But they do have, I think, three legitimate rotation players among the three young players in Podziemski and Moody and Guy Santos. The problem, though, is, do they have enough of the starting players? And I think that's the part where once you get beyond Steph and, of course, Jimmy coming back at some point, but you're not going to have Jimmy for half the season. So how do you look to combat that? Does Kristaps Porzingis come back, Al Horford, all those kinds of things? We will get into that coming up here, as it is Just Dubs. It's a YouTube stream only edition here for KNBR, the sports leader. But the big question, out of last night, and we get into it because I do think it was a mostly disappointing season. I think to be sure, given what the desires were of the Warrior fan base coming into the year, the offseason kind of being hijacked by the Kuminga stuff, and then just by the time they started to feel like they were playing meaningful basketball, the injuries. I mean, look, if you just think of the big headlines from the year, what were the big headlines from the year? Kuminga, right? And then it was Jimmy gets hurt.
Yeah.
It was Moody gets hurt. It was Steph gets hurt. One of these, yeah, go ahead. Well, you can jump in.
It was it was Kuminga dark cloud lifted, and then it was Butler injury, Steph injury, Moody injury, and Gee Santa Pod scoring 30. And Pod scoring 30. There we go.
And Pod scoring 30. Yeah. And the other, and this is not necessarily a good one, but another one was, remember the Joe Lacob email. Remember the Joe Lacob leaked email with a fan. And this was right at the time in which things changed, by the way. This is right when they were 13-14, before they were playing that first of the 2 games against the Suns, right before they got rolling. And yeah, it was the email where, Lacob admitted his own frustration. It was an email where he called out Steve Kerr, frankly. And, it kind of ties in my mind back to the way last night ended. And look, the Warriors didn't have enough in the tank. You give Jalen Green credit. We talked about a lot of that last night. But the big headline from last night, as the Warriors season ends, is Steve Kerr's future. In addition to what the Warriors have to do with this roster, what they have to do with this roster is going to be contingent in a major way off of whether Steve Kerr returns. And I just go back to and I know Steve tried to downplay it, and the frustration of the fan and Lacob's response. You can't be as frustrated as me. I'm working on it. It's complicated. Style of play, coaches' desires regarding players, league trends, and again, part of the original email to Joe, if you remember, was somebody that was kind of putting it on Jimmy Butler, and so he defended Jimmy Butler, and then the email was put on Reddit after Joe had responded, and then everybody got to see it, and so yeah, he kind of called out Steve Kerr in that vein, and Steve said it wasn't a big deal, not concerned about it. But I have to wonder, and we discussed this last night, I have to wonder if maybe things internally are a little bit at this stage, and that's not to say that Steve won't be back, but it feels to me as if things are fractured enough to the point where Steve, at a minimum, is saying to himself, I truly don't know if I want to come back or if it's in the best interest for me to continue, considering, the layout organizationally of the way things are being done. And so I would have thought last night there would have been a little more optimism on Steve Kerr returning. It definitely feels like a coin flip at this point. Ultimately, I feel like he probably will come back for one more year, but I do think it truly is going to be one more year with Steph and Draymond and those three kind of riding it out together before maybe, some other more consequential changes are made. But the one thing that I keep coming back to, internally, did things get more heated than even we know about, to the point where Steve's like, you know what, I got to chill on this. I'm a little burnt. I'm a little sick of kind of the way things have played out. The Kuminga thing I thought took a big toll. I don't think he believed that Kuminga in the summer was going to wind up on the team. I think the all of the consistent questions about Kuminga, I mean, he was a question all the time in the first half of the year, to the Jimmy injury leading to would they actually keep Kuminga potentially. Again, I don't think it was all about Kuminga or anything like that, but the leaked email, I do think shed a light on the fact that internally, while everybody's been professional publicly, that, maybe things had got to a point, not of no return, but things got to a point where, we've all had conversations where things get heated, Kyle, and, whether it's a coworker or a friend or even a family member, and sometimes something can be said in the midst of all the frustration and all the heat that changes the relationship.
Yeah.
To where and you can apologize and you could say, hey, I didn't mean it, or it was the heat of the moment or whatever. But sometimes things get to a point where it gets a little too out of pocket to where you kind of never look at somebody the same way or a situation the same way. And I just wonder if there is maybe a little unknown backstory relating to Steve Kerr and the front office, and more specifically Joe Lacob and ownership, that will be reported at some point, that's kind of led Steve down this path to where he really has to sit and consider his ultimate desires to want to come back to the Warriors.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think I would be really interested if more information comes out. But I think the big thing for me, and Steve Kerr definitely had Kuminga fatigue this season throughout this season. I mean, remember that pregame presser where he was like, "All right, more Kuminga questions, right?"
Yes,
But
exactly.
But I think that whole, I mean, that was what, 3 years of Kuminga was kind of the talk of the town, right? And it was, what are you going to do with Kuminga? Is Kuminga going to get more playing time? Are you going to trade Kuminga? And frankly, Kerr, there was a misalignment from the jump, because Kerr wanted a more polished player like Franz Wagner, and ownership wanted Kuminga. So and then it didn't pan out, and I think that kind of, like, if I was Kerr and we could have traded this guy numerous times, and he was still kind of stuck to where, and then it was finally Kuminga wanted out, and we're just gonna trade him because we kind of have to at this point. Like I would be kind of pissed off if I was Kerr.
No doubt.
Even if he's finally traded, but just the fact that it took so long for that to happen, like, I would be pissed off.
No, I completely agree. And again, I'm not intimating that specifically is necessarily the thing that led to this situation. I think it's a lot of things. I think it's general burnout. I think it's the weight of expectations, frankly, that may be a little misaligned with reality. Because I was having a conversation with Joseph Dicus and Kenzo last night after the game, Kenzo Fukuda, and it was along the lines of I think Steve he enjoyed coaching the team after Jimmy got hurt, and even after Steph got hurt. There's always this sort of misnomer that Steve doesn't enjoy coaching teams that don't have the ability to win a title. I actually think Steve's relished those opportunities to coach the Warriors in the small stretches where winning an NBA championship are not the number one objective, right? I go back to the 2019-20 season, which was miserable. Steph gets hurt. Klay Thompson was out. KD leaves. He's got D'Angelo freaking Russell out there. And then ultimately Wiggins before COVID shuts that season down. And he was genuinely enjoying the opportunity to coach some younger guys. Jordan Poole was a rookie at that point. And just not have that burden of expectation that had been there, I think, for the prior 5-6 years as the Warriors were, 5 years as they were getting to the NBA Finals and winning 3 titles. I think Steve enjoyed, being able to help Podziemski develop and being able to continue to help Moody develop before he got hurt, and continuing to develop Guy Santos and figure out ways to win and compete on a night in, night out basis without the stars. To me, it's not so much that. And I think this is where it does in some form relate back to Kuminga a little bit, in that there, it's easier to develop young players, when the expectation isn't that you have to develop them and contend for a championship. And let's be honest, for as much as, because it's Draymond and because it's Steph and because it was Jimmy, the goal coming into the year was going to be the championship aspirations. But, to have it be so heavy every single night about this or that there is a weight that I think comes with that can be draining. And, while I think Steve at some ways was invigorated by, all right, Jimmy's out, the expectations are gone, Steph's out, the expectations are really gone. Now I can just coach and kind of develop these guys the rest of the way. We'll hope Steph comes back and we can make a little run, which, I don't know if they made a little run. They had one game that they were going to be guaranteed whatever, showed a little bit of what was in the tank. But I think, do the expectations have to almost be a little bit recalibrated here moving forward? And I think that's when Steve, as he did last night, talks about, hey, I got to figure it out, step away, figure it out on my end for the next couple of weeks, but then come back at some point, talk to Mike Dunleavy, talk to Joe Lacob, get everybody in the room and really discuss whether everybody's aligned. Like, to me, that's the other part. It's, are you contending? And if you're contending, it needs to look this way, the way we go about it. If we're half contending, then it needs to look this way. If we're not contending, then maybe it looks a little bit different. And I just think there have been too many times here where it's felt like ownership, front office, coaching staff, and Kuminga is an example of that. Not to make it about him, because we've done plenty of that, but just getting everybody number one on the same page, getting everybody on and if we're not aligned in it, then maybe it's best to part ways at that point. And so I do think it feels much more like a coin flip than you would have originally anticipated. But what do those conversations, sound like in terms of the because I do think Steve has felt that the expectations of winning a title have not been met with the reality of attempting to build a roster through the last 4 years that give the Warriors the best chance to actually compete and contend for a title. Yet he's the one that has to answer the questions every single night about somebody's role, about, all of the questions are asked under the lens of the Warriors getting back to title contention. And I guess what I'm getting at is maybe that shouldn't necessarily be the question anymore. Maybe title contention shouldn't even be on the table for the Warriors at this point anymore, because I think they've shown at a minimum via injury that that's not necessarily on the table. The question, though, then becomes, if that's not on the table, what is what are the realistic goals? Is it get to the second round? Is it, get into the top six? Is it start to maybe look to tear things down to the studs, which I don't think is what anybody wants to do at this particular time with obviously Steph Curry still able to play at the level that he can.
Well, I also think if Steve Kerr does come back, there might be this expectation, and it depends on who they bring in, of course, in 2027. But the expectation to still kind of compete for a title. Whereas I think if it were a different coach coaching the same team, I think there would be different expectations, because it's a new coach and we don't know what's kind of going to happen. Even though, yes, we do have Steph Curry, but since Steve Kerr has been the coach of 4 title teams, I think there's always been that expectation and within the Warrior fan base that and it's kind of because we've been spoiled, but this sense of it's championship or bust want to be one in terms of, is it a successful season or not? So I think they're and it's again, it depends who they bring in and who they acquire and bring back. But I think if Steve Kerr is a part of that, and maybe he doesn't want it to be made as a last dance and the expectation that you have to kind of go out with a bang, but But
this team's got no shot, Kyle. This team's got no shot if they bring the same team back.
No.
And wait for Jimmy, and maybe whoever let's say they end up 11th pick, and they pick somebody 11, even if that guy's a good player. And we'll get into some of the names throughout the course of the spring and the summer. We're not going to do a lot of draft names today because we got plenty of time. We got 2.5 months before the actual draft, and we do need to figure out officially who's going to be picking where, which we're still 3 weeks away. But at this point, too, just for everybody, the Warriors are locked into the 11th slot. So they've got the 9.2% chance to move up. There's a small percentage chance they could move down, but most likely they're going to wind up with the 11th overall pick. But I think you said it, and Bee's Knees gets into there are no goals until we figure out who the head coach is. But I think you're spot on with the fact that the goal can't be championship or bust unless you're looking to go do something more dramatic. And if you can't do it or won't do it, that's fine. But let's stop selling this thing at that point as if it's championship or bust, if that makes sense, because you cannot bring the same team back and wait for Jimmy essentially and believe that you're going to be anything other than right back fighting for the play-in tournament somewhere between 7 and 10, or maybe even on the outside looking into the top 10, trying to get into the top 10, over the final half of the season. And we've seen the toll that it takes on the Warriors in the 2 years where they've won playoff rounds. I mean, go back to you look at the last 4 years now overall. You go 23, have to really overextend to beat Sacramento in 7, and then you got nothing left for the Lakers series. The Lakers beat you in 6. Even though that's a series where you had home court advantage in, the Lakers beat you in 6. Then you miss the playoffs. You get the 10 seed. You win more games than you did the year before, but you get the 10 seed. You get beat by the Kings. 25, you have to acquire Jimmy Butler. You get on this monstrous run, get down to the final day of the season, can't avoid the play-in, have to play in the play-in, win the first game in the play-in to get in and play Houston. You beat Houston. You feel great about Minnesota. Steph gets hurt. Why? With Jimmy already hurt. Why? Because he had to overextend to get to the finish line over the final 30 and in that series against the Rockets, because the Warriors were not good enough to be able to put the Rockets away sooner. And I'm not even blaming them for that. That's just what happens to teams all the time. They're not good enough to be able to finish the deal. And they still win, but they don't win in a manner that necessarily sets them up for the next thing very well. And then this year, due to injuries, sure, they wind up right back in 10th. So they've gone from get in the playoffs, basically on the fringe of the play-in, because they won via tiebreaker to avoid the play-in in 23 to play Sacramento on the last day of the season. And by the way, they had to win the last 5 games of the season that year to get to that point where they ended up 6. So they've either gotten in by the skin of their teeth and been able to, because they got the right matchup, win a first-round series as an underdog twice, and then go out. But then they've also had the 2 years where things don't maybe go as the nightmarish type seasons, and they find themselves out of the playoffs completely. So they got to figure out, what they're going to do to try to make life a little bit easier on themselves in the regular season. And to me, there is no pathway with this same team alone. And it's never the same team. Again, they are going to add at a minimum, the 11th pick. We'll call it the 11th pick for now. Obviously, we know it can move up and slight chance to move down. They are going to try to go big. I do think. I mean, again, we can talk about how it's full of shit and it's wishful thinking and there's no chance at Giannis or Kawhi or LeBron. But you're going to hear an awful lot about Kawhi and Giannis and LeBron over the next 3 months until those guys are no longer options. And then they're going to have to figure out to the extent at which they want to explore the ability to improve the team otherwise. That's not just hit on the 11th pick or get lucky and move into the top 4 like that. And we've seen getting lucky on May 10th in the lottery and moving into the top 4 is no indication that this team automatically is going to make the right freaking pick and get to a point where that player comes in and dramatically improves their chances in the regular season, let alone the playoffs.
Well, also the Warriors, and I think Ramona Shelburne said this. She put that the Warriors are so predictable because they're going to go after LeBron, Kawhi, and Giannis, right? But here's the problem with that. If they strike out on all three, which is a realistic scenario as well as getting one of those, either LeBron or Kawhi, but if they strike out, my worry is that, and we've seen kind of too often, if they strike out on the big name, they do nothing or make a non-needle mover kind of a deal, trade, or sign a free agent, right? So that is my worry, that if they strike out on the big name players, that they settle for their draft pick and some vet minimum player acquisitions and call that an offseason. Like if that happens, we're so fucked.
It cannot be an offseason that is surrounded by, the big moves being, the Al Horford and DeAnthony Melton types. Like that's, and again, no disrespect to those guys. I think the Warriors would love to keep both of them. I don't know that they are going to be able to keep both of them. It feels like 2 out of the 3 between Al and Melton and Porzingis, if you want to throw them in there. And again, I in a perfect world, I would advocate for all 3 to come back, because the best chance at the Warriors improving is bringing the guys back that they have and then adding to it. Like that's the other part. Like you can add to it, get younger, do this or that. But if you're taking away from areas of this team that were productive to add in other ways, that's another version of kind of being different version of the same. And so then you wind up in a pickle there as well. So, all right, let's get into, and I saw this, I'm going to pop up a couple of comments here, going back to Steve Kerr, because I do think this is the first, this is the number one thing. For as much as, we can get into the list of things, the number one thing now is, does Steve Kerr return? Because if Steve Kerr does not return, then you can immediately forget about championship. Like that's, I mean, if you can't talk about that, going into next year at all if you don't have Steve Kerr as the head coach.
Yeah, I think expectations are quickly changed if they have a different head coach. Like I think the expectation is greater with Steve Kerr and what someone else.
No question. And Gene, our buddy Gene checking in, he'll be back unless something was said he can't get over. But grown men sit down and talk and move past it. I think that's exactly what it is. And I think those are the conversations. It seems like this is twofold. Steve gets away. Steve maybe goes on a little soul-searching vacation with the family and talks things through and decides whether he thinks it's best for him to even want to come back. And then the guys get in a room and they hash out, anything that needs to be hashed out. Again, I'm not saying for sure that we know there are things that need to be hashed out on a personal level, as far as, let's say, something being said that needs to be talked through and moved past, Gene, to use your example. Because I think, we all know that type of scenario. We've all been through stuff like that where it needs to happen. But there's that part, and then there's the what are the expectations part, and then there's the how are we going to go about improving part. Like to me, it's like 3. Is there a personal thing that needs to be fixed? What are the expectations going to be? And then are we all on the same page and agree on the means by which we go about looking to improve? Because if Joe Lacob wants a project at number 11 and that doesn't align with trying to win now, then, maybe at that point, Steve says, you know what? I'm not doing the fucking Kuminga thing again. Like, I'm not doing this. So if you get that guy that you're going to expect, me to play or develop, while the cloak is that the guy's supposed to be the fucking savior, to lead Steph and Draymond through the regular season, joined by Jimmy to get to the conference finals, then I'm out at that point. Like, go find somebody else that's going to deal with that bullshit, because it's not realistic. And we've seen, using the Kuminga saga as an example, we've seen that ain't going to work. A few other people in the chat, please Kerr return. Bee's knees, please Kerr return. Again, we shall see. Clem Ackers, the vibe with Kerr was weird last night from what he said to the hug with Steph and Dre. Completely agree. It was almost as if, I think Steve for a while, I don't want to use calculated, but I think Steve for a while has really gone out of his way. And I don't know if it's, I think you have to take it as genuine, but I think Steve's gone out of his way the last few months to basically put Joe Lacob on blast. Like, look, bro, like, I may not come back. Like, do not take me for granted. I agree though. The vibe with the Amazon Prime huddle, with the huddle and him saying, I love you guys. It was as if Steve wanted to commemorate, if it was the last time, he wanted to commemorate the last time, obviously with Steph and Draymond. I do think that was strange in the moment, obviously, that the Warriors knew they were going to lose the game and the season was going to end. But I'm telling you, anytime, and the questions haven't come up a lot as far as Steve's future in press conferences the last couple of months, but when the questions have come up, the vibe has been more that it's not as much of a lock as people might think that he ultimately would return. Kyle, what'd you think of the vibe of everything? Because it's definitely made people think, not only last night, but now we get a night's sleep and wake up again. It's definitely made people think that it's very much on the table that Steve might not return next year.
Yeah, I think initially when we played the soundbite of what he said in that little huddle with Steph and Draymond after he took them out, but I didn't think much of it, but now thinking more of it and going through what he said post game, it felt like if this was the end, this is the end, kind of that embrace, instead of it's been a hell of a season, guys. We'll reconvene next year type of a hug. Like it felt like an almost goodbye hug.
Totally. It absolutely did. So I do think the vibe was weird, but I think the vibe was only weird because, and I will include myself, although I've left the door open and I've said as much on these shows to him potentially not returning, but I do think the vibe has, the vibe was very much, oh, Kerr's coming back, and now it's like, oh shit, Kerr might not come back. Like I think that's something for sure. Clem Ackers, what will Steph do if Kerr leaves? Well, I think it depends. Like, does Kerr leave because Kerr doesn't want to be around, or do they go into this meeting? And somebody said to me last night, just kind of asking the hypothetical question, maybe it's not Steve's decision at some point. Maybe Steve decides he wants to come back, and they get in the room, and Joe thinks it's not the best interest. It's not always up to you. So I do think, what does Steph do? I think if Steve, and I think Steve's going to have a very difficult time because he's going to have to meet with Steph at some point if he decides. I just think, and I guess Steve had mentioned this in the presser too, that he'd have a tough time looking Steph in the eye and tell him he's not coming back. I mean, so much so that he said, "Hey, I'm not going to coach next year." So I wonder, if he's not going to coach somewhere else next year if he doesn't coach the Warriors next year. That to me was a sign of somebody, Kyle, that may have been going through, again, a little bit of a burnout, a little bit of a, do I want to take on the rigors and the pressure and the weight of maybe some unrealistic expectations and having to go through the grind of, the ups and downs of, just think about it from the point of view of, the season starts after the way the offseason went, where they basically couldn't do anything because it was hijacked by Kuminga. Then the season starts, and it's like, well, all these guys, championship or bust. And, oh, by the way, fit Kuminga back in because we signed him to a $22 million contract. And then they do it initially, right? Get off to the 4-1 start. But obviously, we could tell very early it wasn't going to be sustainable. And then you progressively dealing with the constant Kuminga questions. You're dealing with this team isn't living up to expectations after the first 4 or 5 games questions. Then you've got the injuries where guys have to start taking nights off here and there. And the schedule was so brutal with the back-to-backs and everything that it just didn't lend itself. You got a whole team full of guys that have to not play the front end or the back end of a back-to-back. It's just there's a weight, I feel like, to being a head coach. I don't think Steph is gone if they don't bring Kerr back. But I think how Kerr would not come back is important in this. Is it Kerr's decision? Is it Kerr doesn't feel comfortable because of, let's say, the relationship with Joe is too fractured to have it? Those are the things. Like, if it's Steve wants to come back, but Joe is the one that's standing in the way of it, whether it's via his unrealistic view of things or whatever, then I do think, Steph, I'm not saying Steph will be gone. I don't think Steph would be gone, but maybe it sets up a scenario where it might be Steph's last year, next year with the Warriors.
Yeah, no doubt. And I also think, like, if Lacob kind of wants to do, if we remember, the tail ends of the careers of Kobe and Dirk, specifically Kobe rings in my head, where it's kind of just like, let's write it out with Steph while we develop, these young players. Because remember, in Kobe's final years, it was like Brandon Ingram and Julius Randle, right? And it was mainly those guys.
Bunch of shitty coaches.
Yeah. So it's what is the plan for the future of the team and what they want to do. Because if it's not, let's acquire talent and spend maybe future draft capital to acquire that talent, to try and make a push, and it's just, all right, let's write it out with Steph, then I think that would be another case to where Steve would not want to come back and just kind of have things die out while he's coaching.
Yeah, and I said, in fairness, I said a bunch of shitty coaches. That's actually not true. They did have Mike Brown. They had Mike D'Antoni. They had, Byron Scott didn't exactly work. Byron Scott was the coach the last couple of years of Kobe's career. Then they had Luke Walton after Kobe, but it was they had some good coaches. But again, you know what the issue was with those coaches, whether it was D'Antoni or Byron Scott or even Mike Brown at the beginning of those last, let's say, 4 Kobe years. The issue was the expectations didn't match the actual talent on the roster. And so it leads to this, belief that a coach can't get the job done in the way that he needs to get the job done because the expectations are all out of whack. And I think that comparison definitely relates itself. Too much, 89-38, something that caught my ear was Kerr said in the presser, I would never leave Curry. Was also a clue that this is going to be a front office decision if they want him back. And again, I think that shows itself in a couple of different ways. It's does the front office and ownership, I think, specific, because I think Mike Dunleavy wants Steve back. Let's just cut Mike Dunleavy out of it. Mike Dunleavy and Steve Kerr are aligned. Yeah. Now I think Mike and Steve talk, and I think Mike knows that if things aren't a certain way between ownership and the coach, or ownership and the GM and the coach, if they're not all on the same page, maybe Steve's like, screw this, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not gonna take all the shit to stand up at the podium on a night in, night out basis for a bunch of stuff that's effed up and at the ownership level that needs to be adjusted. So I think it's, and he did say I would never leave Curry in the sense that he would, if he doesn't come back, he wouldn't coach anywhere next year. That was the other, I think, kind of caveat to that. And he has said that previously, but I do think it's not necessarily Steve walks in and Joe says, it's time for a change. We want to move on. I don't think it's that. It's the philosophical discussions. It's the goal-based discussions. It's the how do we get better discussions between Steve and Mike Dunleavy and Joe Lacob. To me, it's those hours that they spend together in a room discussing the vision. And if the vision isn't aligned, I think that's where Steve says, all right, I'm out. Like, it wouldn't be Steve, you're fired. It would just be Steve kind of sitting there like, yeah, I hear you guys, but you know what, Joe, what you want is not aligned with what I want. So I'm going to make the decision that we should part ways. To me, that if Steve leaves, that I feel like is the way it's going to play out, in that, yes, it will be literally Steve's decision, but maybe based on the misalignment between ownership and what he wants.
And then I think at that point, I don't think it would matter as much if how bad Steph and Draymond
Exactly.
would want Kerr to come back, because it's like, what the organization wants and what I want, it's not going to work out, and it's just best to remove myself from the equation. But I mean, there's no doubt Steph and Draymond and specifically Curry will have a big voice in the decision. But I think it really is down to Lacob.
Well, I think Steve knows that Steph and Draymond want him back.
Yeah.
But I think Steph and Draymond also know that Steph and Draymond don't have the power to fix Joe Lacob's vision or expectations or desires to, I'll use past examples, desires to, somewhat mythically develop these young players while also contending for championships, like that kind of thing. So I think that's part of it. No Cap says Kerr needs to go. Coaches have a huge impact on roster decisions and player personnel. Ime asked Brad to trade for Derek White because he was an assistant under Pop. Steve loves one-way connectors. Team needs a new voice. Maybe. I don't think the team needs a new voice. Maybe the difference of opinion on players for the roster is something that comes up in that meeting. I will give you that part. I vehemently disagree with the Kerr needs to go. And again, you tell me a coach that the Warriors are going to find that's going to come in and be better for next year's team than Steve Kerr. Like there isn't one. Now, does Kerr maybe need to be a little bit more flexible in allowing certain players to come in that can be, let's say, regular season help? Yes. I also think, but again, that's something I actually don't. I mean, we've had the conversation in the past about, Steve has sort of taken himself out of the personnel decision making, but I think he's so widely respected, No Cap, to your point, that whether it was Bob Myers or Mike Dunleavy, you kind of know. And Joe Lacob's even mentioned this, like, hey, we can go get player X, Y, or Z, but is the coach going to play him? And so Steve could almost not have to speak to it, but there becomes this, oh, well, Steve won't want that guy. And that's not a Steve, so I do think, in fairness, No Cap, and in keeping it a buck, there may need to be, a little bit of an adjustment from Steve on, philosophically, maybe some of the players that and I'm talking more veteran players or young veteran players that can come in and do things in maybe a little bit of a different way. It's not a Jonathan Kuminga should be handed the keys conversation, but it's a, can you bring in a Jordan Clarkson, or you know what I mean? Even I don't want to use Malik Monk as an example, but I'm going to mention Malik Monk because I don't think, as I've said, Malik Monk's not somebody that was highly thought of by Warrior players necessarily because of some of the things that happened with Mike Brown. But that type of player, is somebody that, the Warriors have lacked and can help you win regular season games. But I will say this, it's difficult to bring somebody in, even if you make the decision that you're going to play a player like that. And yeah, Kobe White's a better example because Kobe White, and I get that. And I would have been, I would have been open on Kobe White, but that's the point. I think let's use Kobe White as an example because I think that's a better, it's one thing to say, hey, I'll bring in Kobe White. He can help us in the regular season. He can help us offensively. But I think where Steve has an issue too is he knows the politics of if you bring in Kobe White can help the team in the regular season, but also Kobe White may be somebody that once you get to the playoffs is playing, 5 minutes a half. And then if he's bad enough defensively to where he becomes somebody that the opposition's attacking over and over and over, he might not play at all in elimination or playoff situations. And so that creates a burden on the coach to where, you're almost like there, it almost becomes, well, why the F are you not playing me? You played me all year. Well, because you can't actually help us win playoff games. You can help us win in January, but you can't necessarily help us win. And I know, Kobe White played well, obviously, in the play-in game, the first one that Charlotte won. So it's not absolute, but it's sort of finding that balance between, guys that help you in one way and then maybe can't help you in another way, and having to, manage everyone being harmonious about that fact.
I think one thing that was frustrating maybe about Kerr this season was when we were fully healthy. It took a long time for Kerr to find the right lineup and minutes to give to guys. Now look, I mean, part of it was, Al Horford had such a bad start to the season, and so we were kind of forced to start Quentin Post, right? But Quentin Post is not a starter. Or giving minutes to some players that maybe Kerr wouldn't give minutes to otherwise. But I think there was some frustration. Maybe not. I mean, maybe what Joe Lake up to was what, like, this team had talent, yet we were flirting with 500 to start the year for what, the first 30 games.
They did. You're right. There is and has been, and I will say this is probably Steve's, for all of the things that Steve gets shit for that I think are overblown. I'll say the one thing that I do think he actually does deserve some criticism for is the constant tinkering early in the season. For a team that has the expectations to win as many games, like you can't just be 500 because the injuries are going to come at some point, maybe not to the extent of season enders like we saw or but the injuries are going to come at some point for Steph and Jimmy, let's just say. You've got Horford and Melton and now Porzingis that can't play every night. So that going in, the goal is to avoid the play-in at a minimum, give yourself a chance to legitimately be able to win a series or two. And again, this is a before everybody got hurt criticism. But that going in, and then yet you still use the first 20 games to fuck around with who's going to play and who's not.
Yeah.
And that I will say is a flaw. Now Steve will say it's how he figures out his team each year, and it benefits him down the line. But the problem is it may benefit them down the line, but by the time he figures out who he wants to play, now you've got player X hurt and player Y in a back-to-back and another guy that is a little banged up. And so you come up with the plan, but then the deck of cards you're playing with continues to change. So you sort of find yourself always searching. Again, it's circumstantial based on the roster that's built, but I do think there has not been, and maybe it's unfair to ask for, but I don't think there's been enough urgency for the Warriors in the early part of the season. There's a lot of, let's just get to January and February and then we'll see. Well, guess what? The season's done. The season's done in January and February if you're under 500. The season's done if you're by January basically battling for the 7 or the 8 seed before Jimmy Butler goes down. And now you're the 10 seed because he goes down. Like, those are the types of things where a better roster fixes some of it, But I will say the most legitimate criticism of Steve is, and it is the constant rotation tinkering for a team that really doesn't have the margin for error to be spending a third of the season trying to figure it out.
Right. I mean, this season, I just pulled it up here. They were 2 under 500.
13 and 15.
For a team that closed out last season 23-8, same guys.
I'll give you. He didn't start the best lineup from the end of last.
No,
the best lineup from last year barely played together for the first 28 games. The Steph, Pajemski, Moody, Jimmy, Draymond 5. Which you can say what you want about size and Draymond at the 5, and it's unsustainable and it's all that. But a third of the season, you don't play a lineup that basically went 20-4 and helped you go 21 or 23-8 over the final 31 games. They play like 5 minutes together the first 28 games or whatever. Like that is a misstep. That and again, ultimately. Excuse me. Ultimately, it wouldn't matter because if the Warriors they were 13 and 15, if the Warriors had been let's say 16 and 12, 17 and 11. It still wouldn't have mattered at that point. They would have won 40 games or 39, 40 games instead of 41 games instead of 37 games. Like maybe it would have mattered if maybe they would have been the 8th seed with the Clippers or something like that, or 40. So I don't think it ultimately would have mattered because of the injuries. But it is, I think, disappointing when you look at but that's been an issue I think every year, and it's the misalignment again of maximizing what you have while also managing the fact that you have all these guys that have these different level of restrictions.
Right. Yeah. And again, it can't take you 28 games to finally go on a 12-4 stretch. And I think I remember after maybe it was Jimmy Butler or Steve Kerr, but that they finally found something. I was like, well, why'd it take you 30 damn games for you to finally find something when you still have a team headlined by Steph and Jimmy? Like, why are you ever 2 games below 500?
It's the most legitimate. It's the most legitimate criticism of Steve Kerr. And again, you can get away with it when you have the most talented roster. You can get away with it when you have Steph and Clay in their prime with Draymond and KD, and you can get away with it on that. Diggum chiming in, and again, it was great to meet Diggum last night in Phoenix. Diggum and fam was at the game, hanging out, not wearing the purple shirt with the cactus on it that looked like it was flipping me the bird. In Phoenix. I say every chat, you cannot have all these limited and restricted players who aren't available game to game. If you re-sign all of them, then you will end up in the same place next year. You can't re-sign all of them without adding. I do, and again, maybe it's my literal logical mind. I do think you have a place for all of them, maybe not Melton, considering the salary ability for him to, what he's going to make versus maybe needing to spend that non-taxpayer mid-level on trying to acquire somebody else. But I do think you can bring those guys, like you can bring Porzingis and Horford back, know that neither of them are going to play in back-to-backs, but try to manage it where they both get 50 games. You still need another big at that point that can be, because then your third big is really your second big, because you're in some ways on a lot of nights counting on Porzingis and Horford as one. So you can do that. Melton, I think, is a different conversation. Jimmy's going to obviously have restrictions, but Jimmy is somebody that they want to have come back. Steph, I feel like, is going to have more planned rest nights. I know nobody wants to hear that. I know Steph doesn't want to hear that. Steph's got a little to Christian McCaffrey. Where the legitimate injury will keep him out, but Steph does not want the planned rest nights. He hates them. Like the planned snaps and series to get CMC off the court. So I do think you have to be a little bit more strategic. But the problem is, if you're strategic in nights that you give these guys off and they still get hurt, then they're missing the nights you give them off and the nights where they're hurt. And so then you end up really not having them for the level that you need to have them. But I do think you can bring back. I mean, really, we're talking about Porzingis and Horford. I think in a world, Melton, I think, is more of a question mark for the reason that I said. But and then obviously Steph and Jimmy are not going anywhere. So I do think you can do that, but you have to look to add. Honestly, they need another guard that can create and get his own. I think that's important. I also think they need to get. They're going to need two wings. They're going to need two because they're not going to have Jimmy and they're not going to have Moody. They need two, I think, wings in their like 20, in that 28 to 27 to 29 type range that could come in and fill some time. If it's a Royce O'Neal, if it's a Derek Jones Jr., those type of guys, you're going to need a couple of guys like that.
And
go ahead.
Go ahead. Just one quick thought. And they're also going to need another carrier when before Jimmy comes. I mean, they need someone. They need someone that can carry this team.
I'm glad you said it. I'm glad you said it because it's so ingrained and implied for me that I didn't say it, but you always kind of have to be able to say it. Can't wait on Jimmy Butler and Moody until Feb. There's no I think they're going to, but you can't. You have to have replacement players capable of holding up their end to get to that point. Dig them again. I just think it's been too stressful a season going back to Kerr, the JK stuff, and just what they have given him to work with has been too much for him to want to be here. I think some of the time that's been true. Bees knees. Look at the people in the front office and coaching staff have lost and look at who has replaced them. Yeah, going back to a lot more Lacob in the front office than there used to be. That's something that kind of gets pointed out a lot. A lot more Lacob in the front office. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, look at that's interesting. And then he adds Beasley's adds, and then you have clowns in the media and fan base clamoring for a new head coach. Well, I always say this: like, be careful what you wish for. And it got to the point, and it's interesting. I mean, there are some recent examples. I go back. I mean, this is not a recent example, but I'll use recent examples even in just other sports. I mean, go back to Jim Harbaugh, right? Jim Harbaugh, great 4-year run with the Niners, and it ends. And by the end, people were kind of clamoring for the end, right? They're not going to get over the hump, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And then you basically wind up being a joke for 2 years, and you hire Kyle Shanahan, and you're still a joke for a third year because the roster is so freaking bad that you got to do a full teardown and rebuild, and then you have some injury. Like, it basically, you were a joke for like 4 years, even though Kyle came in and was already starting to change it in 2017. You had the guy, but you didn't know at that point that you had the guy. But it took you 3 hires to find the guy again in 3 years to find the guy. Like, it's like, and again, they found the guy. A lot of teams don't find the guy. Look at the Giants. I mean, fair example. Look at the Giants. By the end of Bruce Bochy, crazy as it sounds, it was kind of, well, it's time. It's stale. Need a shift or whatever. And have they found better than Bruce Bochy in the now 7 years he's gone? No, they have not. And again, it's no shade to anybody else, but and Bruce Bochy ended up winning a World Series with another team after retiring. Like, hello.
Well, also, I mean, this is kind of the point that Draymond brought up a couple of days ago, where it's kind of be careful what you wish for
Definitely.
Kerr, and you don't want it to be the revolving door of head coaches that come and be, because that's the mark of a losing franchise.
It's just I do not see a world where the Warriors, with all the question marks on their roster, don't have Steve Kerr back next year and are better for it. Like, yeah. And again, because they won 37 games because of all the injuries, maybe they wind up winning a few more games, but who gives a shit about that if you've got, less of the ability to contend once you actually play in meaningful games. And that's the other part of it, is like, we can quibble about Steve in the early part of the season. And I do think that's, like I said, the most fair criticism of him is some of the tinkering in the early part of the season for a team that really can't afford to be, can't afford to be tinkering and can't afford to be losing games while they figure out. Like, you can't be losing games while you figure out who you are when you have such a small margin for error as it relates to playing team, not playing team. Like, and the only way the Warriors were not going to be a playing team was if they maximized the regular season. And again, maybe they were incapable of maximizing the regular season, Kyle, because of the roster and the age and the injury. So but still, when they had the guys available, they didn't maximize what they had. They should have had a much better record than 13-15. They should have been 16-12, 17-11. And I think they thought they would be, but they don't have any effing urgency early in the year, and that's something that I think, in addition to the infusion of youth, is going to have to be something that gets factored in. Kerr will take a year off and take the best job available. I think that's, if he doesn't come back, that will probably be the case. Douglas Mikes, I'm so excited for the offseason. Okay. All right. Hell, everybody. I think that was hello, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so excited. I think that was hello. In spite of, I think Kerr will be back. He just has to adjust with the league and where it's going. I think there's a small extent of that. We got another person saying Kerr, TG. Kerr will take a year off, move back home to LA, coach the Lakers and Luka in a couple years, and three-peat. Yeah, I don't know that Steve would want to necessarily coach Luka. That's not again. It's
I wouldn't want to be the Lakers
style. No question. There aren't many coaches who have gotten all that Kerr got out of this roster this year with all the stuff that happened. Completely agree with that one, Diggum. Let's get some more chats here. I know you've bookmarked a bunch. I've been trying to go through a bunch of the ones. I think the Kuminga situation in the offseason didn't help with unifying the roster in a definitive direction. Right. So 1,000,000%. And I think it, as much as everybody liked JK, the person, and I do, that's true. I'm not mocking that. They did like, as much as they like JK, the person, I've said this, the vets wanted him gone for their sake, for his sake, for sanity's sake. And I know publicly things were stated differently, but again, as I've always say, they were being fucking nice. They were being nice. They were not going to, eviscerate a young guy who they liked on a personal level publicly, even though privately it's like, can we just get him out of here and get somebody that can help us and get him to a situation where he can try to maximize his career at a point that he was never going to do with us because he had quit on us? I mean, hello, it ain't rocket science. But yes, I do think in hindsight, the way that it all played out, and honestly, I think the fact that Kuminga played well the first 5 games ended up screwing it up because he played. Remember, Moses Moody got hurt in the preseason, and I think that's what steered Kerr away from the lineup of Moody, Podziemski, Steph, Draymond, and Jimmy. It steered him away from it, and JK got the opportunity to play the 3 there at the beginning of the year. Remember, and Jimmy was playing the 2, and you're like, really? And then it worked, and JK looked more engaged, and that made it. JK, every time JK would have 3 good games, he would think he's arrived and it's time to change it up and start turning it into Kawhi or Kobe again. And then the decline would happen and he'd become a frustrating player and he'd become a player hard to replace, too. So I think the way the season started didn't help, even though that he played well, because once he played well in a starting role, it was going to be incredibly difficult to take him out of the starting lineup when he didn't play well. And I said it at the time, I probably wouldn't have started him. I think Steve was trying to, again, throw him a bone and be nice and try to get him to connect with what was going on. But the only chance in hindsight that it had to work would have been had he come off the bench from the beginning. Because I think once he started, he thought, oh, shit, I can be a starter now. I played well for 3 games. I'm never going to not be a starter. This is what I really want. I'm playing the 3. We're winning for the first time ever when I play the 3, because he stunk at the 3 for the most part. He's not a 3. He's a 4. And then it got to the point where good luck taking him out of the lineup without having him quit. And he quit the moment Steve took him out of the starting lineup. And it was basically a wrap at that point. Kerr is an essential piece to keep continuity and stability going into next season. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, shit, I talk about you want to have, you can bring the older guys back, but you have to add, I mean, it's the same thing with Kerr. Like you have to bring the baseline of what you have back and then add to it. If you start taking major components of this thing away, then you're in a big, you're in big trouble. So again, I think they're going to have to hope that Steve finds enough in the tank to want to be able to come back. Douglas Mikes this summer is going to answer a lot of questions. Lacob and crew can no longer hide behind there's a better move later if we're patient. It's about this offseason. Put up or shut up. That is, might as well pin that one to the top of the chat for the remainder of the chat. No, that's a great call. There's no more bullshit faking the direction of what this thing is going to be.
No more. We're gonna hold on for Giannis. We're gonna keep holding on for Giannis or a bigger move down the line. Right.
You're either gonna get him or you're not.
Right.
Like, period. You're either gonna get him or you're not. And if you don't, then you're gonna be forced to look to do something else. And I have no problem. I'll say it again. I have no problem with the Warriors trying to get Giannis, trying to get Kawhi, trying to get LeBron. As unrealistic, again, as it may seem, if you don't get those guys, it doesn't mean you tap out. Right. And you just bring the same team back with your 11 pick and you put too much on your 11 pick to be the savior for the franchise moving into this, final last dance type of a scenario here. All right, so we've talked about Kerr. Let's do some chats, and then let's continue with some chats, and then we'll start to separate from Kerr, because I do want to get into a little bit more of the roster, and we've kind of done it naturally, Kyle, as we've gone through here, in terms of salaries and who comes back and why. And I've got some questions for you and for the chat to kind of generate that conversation. Again, today's not really about specific names as it relates to the draft. We will come back and do other shows once we know where the Warriors are picking. I feel like you got to know exactly where they're going to pick and who's going to pick where. And then even at that point, there's a month and a half before the draft. So there's plenty of time to do draft analysis and get into rumors and get into players and do the necessary research on who's going to be the right fit and talk to people within the organization and do all of that. So it is a little premature, I think, to get into that at this stage, although maybe we will kick around a couple of names that have obviously been thrown out there or linked to the Warriors here in recent weeks, as everybody was kind of watching the NCAA tournament and the way things played out. So we will have that. We will be with you at different points here on YouTube specifically. But we are going to have some special radio and YouTube shows throughout the course of the time. I know I'm going to still be filling in for Papa a lot here coming up until Papa's able to return here at some point moving forward, which is, everything's on track for that in a good way here at some point. But yeah, the lottery, the Steve Kerr decision is kind of the first thing. The lottery is going to be the second thing. The draft is going to be the third thing. And then obviously free agency is going to be the fourth thing in terms of some of these big markers. And it is not going to be a sleepy offseason for the Warriors in the manner in which it was last year because of how, hamstrung they were by the whole Kuminga situation and the stalemate and the inability to bring players in at that point. So that's kind of the layout of how we're going to do it for the summer. But I do want to sort of set the table with some of the other big question marks as it relates to the roster. As we review the season, and the big headline coming out of last night is Steve Kerr. I'm going to dig into this fridge here in the hotel and grab a Coke real quick. Coke Zero, a Coke, not the way that might have sounded. Hey, stand by. I'm going one that I stole from the media room late last night.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah. So we're going to go, we're going to go Coke Zero. See, that's all it is. I'm going to hold this away from the laptop. All right. I need a little caffeine boost even at 11 in the morning. So we're just going to take a little sip here.
Nothing better than the first sip.
Oh yeah, very good. And it's a little bit. The temperature in the fridge must be. It's a little bit slushy. A little bit slushy. On the break, I thought I thought JD was about to buy a $10 Coke from the hotel. No. I stole this one from the. There were about 3 left in the fridge at the. Irwin, not that kind of Coke. Coke Zero. Coke Zero, everybody. Just a little something to sip on here. Not our usual harmonic although Kyle may have a White Claw. It's funny, you drink the Celsius.
Yeah.
And I always think I'm gonna go, damn, that looks kind of like a White Claw, but
no,
the Celsius can and the White Claw can look similar.
There's this skit that this guy does on TikTok where he's in a work meeting with his boss and he'll have the Celsius but like switch it out for a White Claw can and then the boss goes, wait, that's a White Claw. He was like, no, just Celsius, but then goes back to the White Claw.
Well, and there was a mix up. Like, do you remember last year? There was a recall last year. I don't think it was White Claw. I think it was High Noon. Last summer there was actually.
Oh, really?
They put. I think they sold cans of Celsius that actually had High Noon in the can.
Okay, yeah.
Or they were mislabeled, or the High Noons were mislabeled as Celsius.
Right.
So you thought you were getting a Celsius. And, you thought you were getting a non-alcoholic, energy drink, and you were actually getting a High Noon hard seltzer. You were actually getting a White Claw, basically. Anyway.
Yeah. Next thing you know, you're tapping out on the couch.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The opposite effect there. So let's get to some chats, and then we'll get into the roster a little bit. Just Dubs, our season in review, looking toward the offseason. Did you see Nick Friedel and Marcus Thompson article saying the Warriors aren't going to trade any picks this summer? Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. No cap. I did see that. I did talk to Nick and Marcus a little bit Nick last night, Marcus within the last couple of days in LA. I talked to Marcus a little bit. But no, I did see that. We'll see. We'll see about that. I know on paper, in a perfect world, you make the 11th pick and you feel good about the 11th pick. Oh, I'm having a little Coke Zero emergency here. Actually,
A little spillage.
I'm gonna have to, Kyle. You're gonna have to get. Yeah. Well, it's because it's like frozen over.
Oh.
So it's foaming up a little bit.
Oh, I got you.
I'm gonna like these are the things that you can't do if we were on the radio, but you can do because we're on YouTube. I'm gonna have to actually get a little paper towel here to kind of do a little cleanup. So
Oh yeah, dude.
yeah,
do
Kyle,
your
just
thing.
do
I'll,
some chats.
I'll dig into the chat here.
Yeah, do some chats here while I try to save this beverage.
All right, joke's on you, and I think this is kind of going back to our Steve Kerr conversation. I disagree. It's about roster input and going out on his terms. Words, to your point, aren't the big deal. Remember, he was punched by Jordan. He wants respect, not hugs. I think I'm on the same page in terms of the talent acquisition needs to be greater. I mean, that's the only way that you win games at the professional level. And I think it is as simple as just grabbing more talent and acquiring more talent, but it's how do you do so? And I think they can't run back with the same roster because one, there's too many restricted and limited players like Diggum has always put out in the chats. And then you have to deal with the the players, not playing back to backs. JD, you back? What do you got?
Yeah, I'm back. We got a towel. We cleaned
Oh
up.
my god, a lot of spillage.
Yeah, we had some spillage. Anyway, we don't. Thankfully, nothing around the equipment. And I was able to get to it before we had kind of a disaster here. Yeah, I can't wait for JD trashes hotel room on road trip to Phoenix. But yeah, joke's on you about roster input, and I heard what you were saying there. Words, to your point, aren't the big deal. Remember, he was punched by Jordan. He wants respect, not hugs. He was punched by Jordan. What? Oh, Steve was. Kerr. I was for some reason. That's right. That's right. He wants respect. Yeah, it's interesting. I do think that they have to get on the same page with Steve, you're unwilling to take on certain guys. Okay, well, I'll take on certain guys, but da. They have to figure that part out. I want to go back to the pick point about not trading the pick. Like in a perfect world, if you get a top 3 pick, you make the pick, and it's a good player, and that player can help you next year and maybe be a future franchise, building block piece, because the Warriors don't have any of those guys among their young players now. They have role players, but they don't have potential future, franchise players. They may have starting players, but they don't have potential future franchise players with Podziemski or Moody or Guy Santos at this point. Look, the perfect world scenario is you make the pick, even if it's the 11th pick, and that guy turns into a good. I mean, you got Klay Thompson at the 11th pick. Going back, 15 years ago. Like, you can get a damn good player. I mean, where was Shea? Wasn't Shea 11? Shea was in that range. Halliburton was in that range, 11, 12 range. Like, you can get a damn good player. Giannis was 13, 14. In that range. Like, you can get a damn good player. At that point, it's not a guarantee, and it certainly isn't going to happen every year. But the simplest way for the Warriors to, because you think about, like, what do they need? They need youth, and they need talent. So, I mean, on paper, what's the best way to get young talent? High draft pick, right. A lottery pick. So I understand the notion of not wanting to move the pick, but you better take the right guy. Like, that's the thing. And that's the part where I think the front office has no faith. And that's the part where, to bring it back to Steve about roster input and the fact that, he wants a Franz Wagner, you take a Jonathan Kuminga, that kind of thing. Like, the Warriors cannot have that. Like, if you've got guys that want the 2026 version of Kuminga versus the 2026 version of Wagner, you better take the 2026 version of Wagner. Like over the 26 version of Kuminga. You better take the 26 version of Trey Murphy over, or Alperen Sengun. You better take the 2026 version of those guys over Moses Moody. No disrespect to Moody, who's made himself into a rotation player and maybe even a fringe starting player consistently in the NBA. But that's the point of the whole thing. And Steve knew. Clem, the Warriors remind me of the Niners with first-round picks. Like, you cannot – I understand keeping the pick, but the pick better work.
Yeah.
Like, it's a results – it's a results-oriented business at this point. So I'm with you on that, Clem. Let's keep it going in the chat here. A lot of great chats. We appreciate everybody joining us again after joining us last night. And we did a good 2 hours last night on the radio and here on YouTube. We're going to do, I don't know that we're going to make it. We're probably going to make it. I think we are going to make it to 2 hours. We'll at least make it to noon. I think Kyle's like, wait a minute, I got to go. I got to play 9 somewhere. What is the salary cap looking like in July? Steph, Jimmy, and Moody take up a chunk. Well, that is a good segue into being able to look at the roster composition a little bit. And I think when you look at the salaries, you start to look at the contracts and the salaries. Steph's going to be making 62.5 next year. And then Jimmy is going to be making, 56.8. Draymond right now on the books for 27.6. So the guys that are under contract right now, Steph 62.5, Jimmy 56.8, Draymond at 27.6, but of course he's got the player option, so he can opt out and they can knock that number down if they stretch it into future years. You've got Moses Moody 12.5, and then you've got Horford who can opt in for 6. You've got Melton who can opt in for 3.5, but he's obviously going to opt out. And be able to get more than that. Podziemski on the hook for 5.6. And then they added Guy as well at what, around Guy was around $5 million, I think, for next year. And then Will Richards under contract at $2.1 million for next year as well. So that's it. The Warriors, though, right now, if you factor in Guy, and everybody else comes back, you're at 170. You're at about 180 in terms of the overall number. And so, they are going to have to. They are going to have to figure out. They're going to have to figure out how to duck the first apron and be able to try to do some things that don't hard cap themselves. And so it's difficult. I mean, it was the cap is actually expected to go down a little bit potentially next year. We'll see. But the luxury tax level is projected to be around 200. First apron 209, second apron 222, right around there. But the cap is expected to be, I guess, around 165, 170, something like that. So the Warriors are basically already at the cap with the guys that they have. And look, how many players is that we just said? I mean, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 if you count Guy Santos. Doesn't include Porzingis. Let's say Porzingis makes about $15 million. Then you're at 190 right there. So you're approaching the tax with that, and you've got your draft pick's going to have to get factored in. So there is a big time chunk of your cap that's going to be taken up by your main guys. Question from Erwin Kwong. Do the Warriors get any special injury compensation for Butler and Moody's injuries? Not in terms of like salary cap relief or anything like that. I'm not sure if they have like insurance policies that saves on some of the cash because they're injured. teams will have the ability to do that. So they might be saving on some cash out of pocket if they had insurance situations. But in terms of, no, they don't get anything in terms of, nope, those guys are on the roster. And you can get a disabled player exception if guys are going to be out for the season and you need and you need to fill roster spots, but the only way you get that is if guys are out for the entire season. So you would not get that next year, and doctors get involved and project timelines. And so Moody is not a lock to be out for the entire season next year, nor is Jimmy. So the Warriors would not get any kind of an exception for next year as it relates to either of those players. If anything, they could have maybe for this year, but I think the timing of the injury also, like if it happens too late in the season, then you can't get it. And I think Jimmy's injury happened right after the deadline for disabled player exception. I think if he had gotten hurt a week earlier, they would have been able to get a disabled player exception maybe for him. But it happened after the fact, and Moody in March with his injury happened after the fact there. So yeah, it's not the kind of thing where you can get that level of player in March. You have to have the injury early in the year, and you have to declare that player be out for the entire year to be able to qualify for that. You can't use it as, hey, the guy's going to be out till March. Let's add somebody to the roster and then have the guy come back in March. It's got to be a full-blown – Kyle, it's got to be a full-blown replacement.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my literacy in NBA general management and salary cap numbers maybe pretty small. Not teaching you a lot about salary cap at Cal Poly. I'll tell you that.
They do teach you how to spend money, though.
Yeah.
No, I
specifically on golf.
Specifically on golf. Yeah, specifically on golf. Hey, Beer Man, I just don't understand the people that want to get rid of Kerr and think his replacement is automatically going to be. He's not going to be a better coach. He's not going to be a better coach. And look, what are we talking about? Let's actually get into this in terms of, like, let's say Steve Kerr isn't the coach.
Yeah.
Who should be the coach? And I'm a little reluctant to get into this now because we don't know that Steve isn't going to be back. I'll tell you a name that was floating around in the chat earlier that that I've mentioned in the past. I would have loved to have been in the conversation if Steve wasn't going to come back, and it would have been Michael Malone. I think, but he took the North Carolina job, surprisingly, and good for him. I think he's going to do really well in college. Great coach, detail-oriented. He's a hard ass. For sure. I mean, you think Steve Kerr's hard on young players. Michael Malone's really hard on young players. So I don't know that it necessarily would have been a fit. And Michael Malone will call out his team in the media a lot. And I think that wore on the Nuggets players, although I think there was the belief that, as time went on, the veterans sort of got to do kind of whatever they wanted. And then he was really hard on the young players, and then he'd be publicly hard on everybody, and kind of wore out his welcome there. Although he was the coach there for a decade, basically, and they did win a championship and had a ton of playoff success. But Michael Malone's not going to be in the conversation. First name that comes to mind, though, is Terry Stotts.
Yeah.
Because you're at this point, you're not looking at like the next guy that you're going to grow with for 5-6 years. You're looking at basically the guy that's, that can get you through the next 2. and then, cause you're going to want to have a coach. You're going to want to have a coach that maybe grows with your rebuild. And I don't think that's necessarily Terry, but Terry could coach the veteran. I mean, Terry's been a brilliant offensive mind. He hasn't really been much of a defensive oriented coach through the time in Portland. And before that, obviously with Milwaukee, and he was actually a Warrior assistant way back in the day, like 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. when he was kind of first coming up. But yeah, there are. I mean, Stotts, I think, is there is this note like you're going to hire this next wave coach that's going to come in and just fix everything and do all the things Kerr wasn't doing. Like, I mean, that's a crock of shit. That is complete fantasy at this point. But so yeah, I mean, Terry Stotts would be somebody that I think should be considered off the top of my head. Is there a name that stands out to you that you think would be a good potential option if Steve does not come back?
I mean, yeah, internally, yeah, Terry Stotts, Jerry Stackhouse, but I mean, I want like Mike Brown's seat in New York isn't necessarily, stable there. Like if they don't make something happen, I could see the Knicks letting go of Mike Brown, and maybe the Warriors would be interested in bringing him back. But I would not want Doc Rivers. Definitely a hard pass on.
No, that's a quick way to burn the whole thing to the ground. I think at this point, although I could see Doc campaigning for it. I think he was already kind of campaigning for it. Did you see his Bill Simmons podcast? He went on with, he kind of did his own little media tour in the aftermath of Milwaukee, saying he wasn't they weren't going to keep him. But I think everybody kind of knows what time it is as it relates to Doc. So I don't think he would be in the consideration. But yeah, the bottom line is you go outside the box if Kerr doesn't return, and you're gonna be worse off for it. I think that's pretty simple. So we'll get into more names, but I mean I would be in the short term comfortable with Terry Stotts. Again, I don't think that's necessarily the kind of move that gets the Warrior fan base that thinks Kerr needed to be gone 2 years ago excited, or that Kerr cost him multiple championships. Like, I don't think that's the kind of name that people think is going to move the needle. But I think he would be somebody, experienced, a lot of good playoff, winning experience, although not championship level playoff winning experience, and a hell of an offensive coach. I think he could maximize your offense in a lot of ways. But again, you'd have to obviously have some guys on staff that could really teach defense, and maybe Jerry Stackhouse winds up staying. Maybe Stackhouse winds up in consideration for the job. I think that's another name. But yeah, Stotts would probably be at the top of the list, at least for me, if you're going to, because you do want to keep it the same, I think, or similar. You do want to have some level of continuity with the veterans and the guys that have been around. What if Ty Lue gets fired? Would you take him? Yeah, yes. Ty Lue's a hell of a coach. Ty Lue is a hell of a coach. 100%. And I would put Ty Lue ahead of Terry Stotts if he's available, and would want to come. I mean, Ty Lue's a damn good coach and highly thought of in league circles, to the point where he could get potentially whatever job he wants if he winds up not with the Clippers anymore. But no, Ty Lue would immediately go to the top of a list. I hadn't really considered him because obviously he's still with the Clippers at this point. But yeah, Ty Lue definitely would be somebody that you would covet if you were the Warriors. Let's continue. Are there any other names maybe in the chat we can get to as we roll through?
Well, yeah,
okay.
Hold up.
Yeah, we'll get back to Jay Bird there. I do want to get Jay Bird. But yeah, if we do have some names, Brad Stevens, would he walk? I mean, Brad Stevens would be. I think Brad Stevens is doing pretty good running the Celtics right now. Yeah. He's basically there. Maybe not the official title, but he's basically the president of basketball operations there, the GM. So he's doing well. Short answer, no. Mark Jackson. Short answer, no. Robert Grigori. Yeah, that ain't happening. Let's
see.
Get some other names. I mean, the Brad Stevens.
Oh, I think someone here. Wait, let me find it. I think someone put
Doug Christie.
No, someone put Tibbs as kind of a joke.
Yeah. What about Tibby Tibbs? I mean,
Steph Curry would be out for the season.
You could do worse. I like Tibbs, but I don't know that a guy that wants to play all of his guys 40 minutes a night is great for the load management brigade that the Warriors are going to be rolling out next year. I do like Tibbs as a coach, but that one's not going to fit. Jamal Mosley should be available shortly. Jamal Mosley's an interesting name, but again, to me, Jamal Mosley's the kind of name that, like, I wouldn't want him to be the next coach of the Warriors, but I wouldn't mind him being the coach after the next coach. And obviously Mosley with Orlando, and so we'll see. Mosley's a good name. And Orlando did obviously advance last night, but they're going to be in a situation where they're going to be out pretty quick in the Eastern Conference playoff race. Cassell or Micah Norrie would also make sense if Minnesota is out. Chris Finch would be great. Chris Finch is a really good coach. That's a good call. Sam Cassell. I don't know about Sam Cassell. Again, that would be the first head coaching job for Sam. I don't think you want necessarily a first-time head coach. And if you were going to go that route, I think you would probably go with the internal candidate in Jerry Stackhouse. Micah Norrie's been around for a while. And isn't Norrie is – where is he? He's with Finch, right?
Assistant for the Timberwolves.
He's with Finch in Minnesota. And so, he's going to be among the top head coaching candidates. I think that's a good name. That's a good name to kind of throw into the mix as somebody that he could possibly be. I feel like Mike Norrie could possibly be one of those names where he could be a guy that, you hire innovatively, to coach the vet guys that you have, but also would be somebody that maybe you would want if you wind up in a rebuild in the next couple of years. Like, he kind of checks both boxes, so to speak. But I like Finch. This is a long list, Max Lopez writes, of worse coaches than Kerr. Correct. I mean, again, nothing against any of these guys. There are names I like more than others, but that is 100% correct. This is a long list of worse coaches than Kerr. Bingo. I mean, bingo. So I think that's interesting. We'll see how it all. That feels like the first domino now to drop. And you look at Mike Dunleavy's going to have his season-ending presser, I believe, Monday. And Steve Kerr, my understanding, is not going to be part of that. Basically, Steve Kerr's next time meeting with the media is going to be once he decides to return. And so basically, if he decides to return, then he'll have his season-ending post-mortem I'm staying press conference. If he decides he's not going to return, then he may have a press conference at that point, given the stature that he's had with the franchise. But basically, Mike Dunleavy's going to be asked a lot of questions about his desire to have Steve Kerr return on Monday, in addition to the ability to kind of fix and rebuild the roster. That's not abnormal, by the way. Basically, Steve's contract is up with the last game. I think literally it might go through the end of June, because most NBA contracts do. But basically, you're not going to have Steve not knowing if he's going to return or not come up to the podium on Monday and start breaking down, the season and players. He was able to kind of do that in the aftermath of the game last night down here in Phoenix. It's the same as Kyle. If Lacob let Kerr go, that there would be a mile-high list of teams requesting for Kerr services. Oh, without a doubt. And if he takes a year off, I mean, who knows where things are going to stand in terms of some of the potential, contending teams that would want to have him. I know, San Antonio gets mentioned. I think they got to give. they had a great year this year, and I know we've talked about could they win the title this year. Like Mitch Johnson's done a really nice job. I think I know that seems like in some ways kind of a no-brainer. Like if they don't win this, like, to me it would have to be they don't win this year, they don't win next year. And there's a belief that he held them back. Like, I don't know. There's part of me that sees, with Popovich still being influential within that organization, even as he's taken a step back due to the health concerns. I just could see like Popovich. I could see Popovich and those guys. I actually could see I could see Popovich and their management kind of saying, you know what, we're not going to screw Mitch Johnson, man. Like he's here, he's done a good job. Like we're not going to give him, 2 years, basically 1 year of a title contending team. And if they don't win it, we're going to fire him. Like I actually think I actually could see Pop, as much as Pop and Steve Kerr are close. I could actually see Greg Popovich being like, nah, F that. Like, we're going to give Mitch Johnson an opportunity to so I don't know. I don't feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like San Antonio would, in its unique circumstances, right? Because Mitch Johnson got the job because of, Popovich and the stroke and the health issues that he had. But I don't know, man. I feel like San Antonio would want to do right by Mitch Johnson for maybe longer than 2 years, unless it's really bad and really apparent that he's not the guy, considering the way Popovich has spoken about other coaches and the ability for him to, them to grow and fail and have the opportunity to have success. Although interestingly enough, Popovich, if you go back, he got his job back in the day when he got his job basically back in the day in the year that David Robinson got hurt for the entire season. He took over as the interim coach. They tanked and ended up getting they ended up getting the number 1 pick, drafted Tim Duncan, and then Popovich basically made himself the coach at that point once they had David Robinson and Tim Duncan, and the rest is history, the rest is history, as they say, with the 5 championships and everything that the Spurs went on to do. But there was some fortunate timing there, as it related to Duncan, that is sort of aligned with the fortunate timing with Mitch Johnson and obviously Wemby and all of that. All right, let's continue in the chat here. Come on, Silver, work that magic and get the Dubs a top 4 pick. Well, if Greg Silver could do it, Greg Silver would do it. But I know you're talking about Adam Silver. So, yeah, we shall see. But you know what? Here's the thing on that, and we're having fun. Why would it's not as if the Warriors this decade have not had lottery pick luck. They moved up to, well, they moved down, I guess, to 2 technically, but they had the number 2 pick.
Yeah.
They had the number 7 pick.
Well, so
they've had lottery pick. I don't know. Like, it's not as if, I guess they didn't get the number 1 pick, which would have got a man, but
if I remember correctly, wasn't that number 7 pick, wasn't that like top 5 protected? Because I okay, because I remember it
unprotected. I think it was unprotected.
Oh wow,
I think it was unprotected.
Okay, because I think I remember,
I might be wrong on that, but
I could also be wrong, because I thought it ended up being in like a really like one of the better positions that it could be for the Warriors. I could
I want to say it was unprotected, or maybe it was protected if it was the number 1 pick.
Oh, okay.
But as long as it wasn't the number 1 pick, it was that's interesting. But yeah, that and again, you remember the Warriors got the pick for basically taking on Wiggins.
Right.
They ended up getting a 1st-round pick for taking on Wiggins, and then it turned into Kuminga. So we'll see. But yeah, the Warriors have had the lottery opportunity here. in recent time, and unfortunately they when they were afforded the opportunity didn't make the most of it, which is why they're in the position, unfortunately, that they have been in here for these last few years. If they had hit on those picks, we'd be having a completely different conversation. Two timelines would have actually lived, and this team would be a hell of a lot closer to championship contention if they had wound up, bringing in the right players via the draft. All right, let's do a few more here. In the YouTube chat, they could have gotten the number one if they had traded the JK pick back and the number 2 to Minnie. That's interesting. Going back to 2020, could have gotten that if memory serves. The one that always stands out to me is the trade back, where they could have got Wendell Carter Jr. and traded back to like 4 or 5. And again, that's the one where I would have said I would have picked Halliburton. Like, I wouldn't have picked Halliburton 1 or 2, but I would have picked Halliburton 4 or 5, and felt really comfortable with him. And again, we go back to, why did the Warriors not, they loved Halliburton from everything that I'd heard. They absolutely loved Halliburton, but they didn't think that obviously he was a top 5 level pick. And they also, at the time, if you remember, had Jordan Poole, who was going to factor into their future. And of course, Steph was going to be coming back off the hand injury, and Clay was going to be coming back off of the knee and the Achilles injury. And so that would be, that would be that on that note. All right, let's do a couple more. Kyle's got a jet, and so we'll wrap this thing up a little bit short of noon here. Kyle's got a big barbecue to go to. You got barbecue?
It's my dad's birthday.
Nice.
Dad's birthday today, turning 65. The big
Awesome.
65. So officially a senior, right?
Man!
Wow!
Look at you! Look at you throwing shade! Look at you throwing shade!
Senior. But he put me in charge of picking up the chow mein from this Chinese place down the street.
Okay.
And
you got to pick it up.
And I got to pick it up.
Although
I think I could pick it up anytime, but I think he's getting set up right now in Golden Gate Park.
Oh,
it's
nice.
in Golden Gate Park.
Well, that's awesome.
You can find us there.
Man, go find Kyle and his dad and celebrate the birthday and get some grub if you're in the Bay. Man, I'd like to. Maybe I'll try to sneak on this earlier flight here.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll come party with the Hars. All right. Top 4 pick would be used for Giannis. That's probably true. All right, let's do like 3 more, and then we'll let Kyle get out of here, because Kyle's got mouths to feed, literally, like his pops on his birthday. Whoever released the Jordan Poole Draymond film hurt too. Yeah, that obviously ended effectively Jordan Poole's tenure with the Warriors, which has changed the trajectory of the way the last 3 or 4 years has played out. Jay Bird, I'm glad we got one last game that made us feel like the Warriors again. I'm glad we still get a chance at a high pick, and most of all, I'm glad it's finally over. Yeah, it was I mean, look, we're blessed to be able to come on and talk about this team, but man, what a draining season this has been in terms of the expectations and the hopes, and then the disappointments, and then the injuries and things that are going to screw up next year. That's a good one to end it on, actually. I think as well, as we wrap up the year on just dubs.
Well, Steph was kind of limping to the finish line here as well. I mean, he was limping in the Suns game. I mean, I'm not sure what happened in the Clipper game when he went to the locker room. There wasn't a noticeable limp. Maybe he just had to use the restroom. But he was grabbing at the knee in that game and limping in the Suns game. So maybe it was for the best. But yeah.
No doubt. And you don't want to play OKC, because guys get hurt against OKC. So I was kind of thinking about that as the game was winding down, 5 games of OKC, 7 games of OK, whatever it would have been. Like, you don't you definitely, there is a benefit in just kind of having it end, and you take your losses and you quit while you're where you are, and move on into the spring and into the summer. So the big decisions are coming. What happens with Steve Kerr? What happens with Draymond Green? What do the Warriors do in terms of their draft pick, which will be in the lottery, either top 4 or right there in that 11 spot or somewhere around there? We're going to be here for all of it. Stay tuned, as they say. Just Dubs, JD, and Kyle Haar. We are going to be going live. We are going to take a little bit of a breather here. Kyle, we might do a stream off of the pressers that come. I'll keep you posted on that. We might do a little stream, maybe Monday night. I'm thinking. I don't know what the schedule is. I know the Giants are not playing, but maybe Monday night we do a stream only, just in the aftermath of some of the pressers, when Mike Dunleavy speaks to the media and whatever. But we'll kind of go by big event. It'll be, Dunleavy exit interview pressers with the players, Steve Kerr's decision, the lottery. And then we'll do some streams coming into the draft and kind of breaking that stuff down as well. So look for us. If we do it in the Saturday slot, we'll let you know. If we do it in the evening, sometimes as news breaks, we'll let you know. So keep it locked on get the notification for when we go live. Get the notifications on Twitter. We'll try to put out there when we're going to be jumping in and doing a show so that the people can join. That is something we want to get better at doing than we were in last offseason, is connecting with the regulars and making sure everybody has the opportunity to voice their opinion. So that'll do it. Appreciate everybody. Kyle, thanks to you, my man. Go enjoy the picnic. And thanks to everybody in the chat. We'll talk to you soon right here. Just Dubs, JD, the sports leader.